What's going on, gamers? Welcome to another episode of What I Watched This Month, September edition. This was an interesting month because if you've been living under a rock, I went to the Toronto International Film Festival. But aside from the many amazing films I saw there, I also watched a lot of good stuff outside of it, so let's just get right into it. We got a lot to cover. I kicked off the month with Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. This was my first time watching it, and yeah, it was something. I can see why some people don't like it, but I really enjoyed this thing from pretty much start to finish. As bizarre as it is, it feels like one of Kubrick's more down-to-earth films, and I definitely watch it again. As of now, I only like it and I don't love it the way I do some of his others, but regardless, for a story like this, he pulled it off. Next, I watched the Safdie brothers film Heaven Knows What in preparation for Uncut Gems, which I didn't even see at TIFF. This was good. It had pretty much everything there is to love about Good Time, and I'm assuming Uncut Gems, haven't seen it yet, but yeah, it's definitely not as strong as what I'm used to from them. While consistently engaging and some great performances from non-actors, it felt kind of soulless at times, but regardless, if you like Good Time, you should check it out. I actually followed that up with The Black Balloon and We're Going to a Zoo, two shorts from the Safdie brothers that are available on the Criterion channel. Both are phenomenal. Then I went to TIFF and I watched Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Waves, The Climb, Parasite, The 20th Century, Knives Out, The Lighthouse, Color Out of Space, Synchronic, The Goldfinch, Jojo Rabbit, A Hidden Life, The Truth, and Joker. I'm not going to go into depth on all these films in this video. If you want my extended thoughts on them, you can check out my TIFF video. When I got home, I saw Hustlers, the new film starring Constance Wu and J-Lo, and I loved it. This was a consistently engaging film. I never felt bored for a second. A few scenes were a little ridiculous and it did feel repetitive at a certain point, but for the most part, this was super well done and I was very entertained. I think the way in which it went about telling the story of these women was super unique and honest. The whole thing felt super morally ambiguous, which I think makes for some super interesting discussions. Overall, I really enjoyed this film and would happily watch it again. After that, I watched Crumb, a documentary on Robert Crumb, a famous satirical and controversial comic artist who happens to be one of the most interesting people I know. I'll come right out and say it, this is my new favorite documentary of all time. I have watched maybe less than 50 documentaries in my life though, so do what you will with that information. I was totally into it 100% of the time. The way these films lead you down this rabbit hole as things get more fucked up the more you learn about them is so fascinating and done in such a mature way. For a guy like this, it'd be really easy for a sense of bias to come out of the filmmaker, and I feel like Terry Zwigoff was able to make it feel as though it was just the viewer and Crumb in this intimate story. I love this thing. I'm definitely buying the Criterion copy, and you should all check it out on Amazon. Next, I changed the pace and watched What We Do in the Shadows, a mockumentary by Taika Waititi about a bunch of vampires. I've been recommended this film since basically I made myself known on the internet for whatever reason. Literally everyone wanted me to know that this is something I'd love. And yeah, it's great. It's hilarious. It's not something where I necessarily took away much though. It's a lot funnier than anything I've seen by Waititi, but it definitely didn't feel like it brought the same amount of heart that something like Jojo Rabbit had. Regardless though, this is at times overwhelmingly hilarious, and I definitely feel as though I can recommend it to anyone I know. I then rewatched The Dark Knight for my Joker video. As I mentioned, I don't really feel it was fair to say I've ever really seen The Dark Knight prior to this. I saw it in middle school but wasn't paying a lot of attention, so I'll count this as my first experience. I really liked it. I don't think it's aged necessarily well in parts, but in a lot of ways it actually has. It's inspired countless comic book films and action films and even certain dramas. The way it plays with time through its editing is seamless. Nolan makes it look super easy. It's a really great and entertaining time. I wouldn't say I was necessarily blown away by anything, but yeah, it's a great movie. Okay, can we move on? Then I saw Astra starring Brad Pitt, directed by James Gray, and I love it. I had no idea what to expect going into this. Some people were saying it was awful, others said it was a masterpiece, others said it was average, and I'm just like, hey, I'm here for a good time. I really liked the approach of this film and how it tackled masculinity and daddy issues. My relationship with my dad is all good, don't worry, but this made me weirdly emotional. I almost cried, and I don't really know why. There was something very honest and vulnerable coming out of this film, which is touching to see coming from a big space movie starring Brad Pitt. After that, I saw Ishtar, directed by Elaine May, one of the biggest flops in the history of film. I watched this for my podcast, the Karsten, available on all podcast platforms. If you want to hear my full thoughts on it, you can go listen to that, but for now, I'll just say it's really stupid, but really funny, and also, get this, pretty genius. Then I rewatched Climax, directed by Gaspar Noé, just because I felt like it, and as always, I loved it. This is one of my favorites of the year, and it's one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen. It's a very original film, and cuts out all the bullshit that usually comes with a Noé film, and focuses entirely on what he's good at, making something visually miserable to watch. And I love it. It's one of the most impressive films I've seen, and I find something new to appreciate about it every time I watch it. If you haven't seen it yet, get some friends together, sit in silence for 90 minutes, and knock yourselves out. The last film I watched was Manos, directed by Alejandro Landes, and I liked it. I loved how this thing was shot, and all the performances were phenomenal. The story was original, and the effort that went into the filming must have been through the roof. I mean, it's a very impressive film, it's just very knee-deep in mud on a foggy and humid afternoon. By that I mean it never really picks up off the ground. It's a really dirty film for the entire time. In some ways I love it for that reason, but for a few scenes I was like, really? A lot of scenes were just holding on and paying attention to things that didn't really feel like they needed to be taken seriously compared to other things that were happening in the film. film. Plus it stuck to one tone and didn't really expand on it, making it feel pretty boring at times, but it's not a necessarily bad tone. It was definitely interesting for a good chunk of the film. It just really lost me in a few scenes. And after that I finished seasons 1 and 2 of Barry, and I will be expanding my thoughts on that very soon. As you can tell, it was a busy month. I got a whole lot of videos coming out pretty soon, and I cannot wait for Spooktober, where I usually don't end up watching that many horror films. Thanks for watching. Check out all these films and form your own opinions, and I'll see you all in the next one.